Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the political movement that PTI is talking about and whether there is a real reality to it and what does the opposition want to manifest, whether they have the numbers or they have the kind of support that they're talking about when they talk about 3-day protests outside Adiala, which they then hint at culminating into a larger protest. Will that actually happen? We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the relevance of the opposition today and whether their continued strategy of these protests is a deliverable for them at this time. All of that today on Perspective. We'll also be talking about, of course, street agitation over dialogue, which we've seen over time. Again, whether that strategy will have can have a different result, whereas where the method seems to be the same. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Aniq Zafar, who's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. Daniyal Sheikh, who's also joined us on many occasions to give his views. He's a political analyst. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Muneeb Qadir, who's a lawyer. Thank you for joining us. And Safi Ghauri, who is also a lawyer and also very grateful for everyone's presence today. Aniq sir, we're talking overall about the strategy of having, protesting, street agitation over talks. And we know that we've, for a time seen the preference as far as the opposition, mainly the PTI is concerned. At this time, do you think the government seems bothered enough?
Thank you, Mahrukh. First of all, any government should be a little bothered when there is opposition which wants to go to the street.
Okay.
Because it does not suit the government that there should be street agitation, because then the whole news cycle, the narrative is captured by that agitation and that kind of unrest in the country. But in this scenario, what I see is that now the government has seen PTI so many times on the street that it is not pushed now. It is not bothered. It has handled its street agitation previously, and it is confident that it can again. On the other hand, PTI is opting for street agitation for the lack of any other strategy they have been able to sort of chalk out. They have not really given a thought or have not really found any way forward so far. So what do? They announce street agitation. But this is quite odd right now because I don't think that their alliance with Maulana Fazlur Rahman is moving forward anyhow. Then on the issue of terrorism, which is rampant right now in Balochistan and KP, both have a different view. You may have seen Maulana Fazlur Rahman saying that no concept of jihad is applicable in Pakistan currently, and he is dead against TTP right now. While PTI and its leadership have had a soft corner towards TTP. So there are major fault lines between Maulana Fazlur Rahman and PTI.
Okay,
without Maulana Fazlur Rahman, I don't see them making any impact.
Okay. Daniyal, on the one hand, what Aniq Saab is saying is of course true. There seems to be, but why then this talk of a protest? When we know where we are in terms of economy. We know that the IMF has agreed to a new package. They have they've agreed on the progress that the government has made. So in terms of, I'm just trying to say that the scenario at this time for the government seems to be a stable one. Do you think that in this scenario this protest is going to be relevant?
Basically, for the party that is announced the protest, it's going to give them two benefits.
Okay.
Number one, it's going to keep them relevant, especially in the media, and it's going to keep it's a way of keeping their workers a bit charged. But more than that, it's also and escape from the accountability of their poor performance in their province. See, the provincial governments are responsible for law and order, and the law and order situation in the province that they are governing is constantly deteriorating, especially this new influx of terrorism that we are seeing. Now, need of the hour was a national consensus, especially at the provincial level. The provincial chief executive should have got together all the Maulanas, the clergies, and there should have been a consensus. See, now this new wave of terrorism, which just recently the Jamia Haqqaniya was targeted and Hamidul Haq got assassinated. See, this is it's a wake-up call for the government to realize how misguided people are. Because see, although there are very few elements supporting this sort of terrorism, but if it's not, if a consensus against it is not created, it's going to further proliferate within the society. It needs to be addressed, and more than that, they're also generally their performance, like for example in their manifesto, the thing that they emphasized was autonomous local government. Like recently, the funds given to the local governments, they were given after a year and a half, they were withdrawn. So no local governments in Pakhtunkhwa are given any fund, although NFC clearly states that 25% of the money given by the federal government will directly go to the local governments. So there's a lot of skeletons in their closet which they're trying to hide, and by doing this, this is their agenda in my
Muneeb, do you think that it's, you know, what Daniyal is saying, you know, on the one hand, it's about continuing, one, to remain relevant, and two, of course, you know, their own performance in KP, the questions that are being raised there. But do you think it's going to make a difference overall? And also, you know, within the party, there was a lot, you know, there's a lot being said in terms of, you know, their infighting and things that were being said within the party itself, and, you know, their leadership and their role overall. Do you think it's also to circumvent any more, you know, fragmentation occurring there?
First of all, I think that PTI is fading into irrelevance, and this is something that they had not expected. And even I had not expected that, because I thought that they were so good at being the miscreants that they are, doing propaganda, using social media, as well as their street power, or whatever street power that they used to talk about. I thought that they had a lot of tactics and tricks up their sleeves, but somehow I think that the public has also lost interest, and even you know, many members of the public who were being attracted to the narrative that was being dished out by the PTI founder and PTI leadership. You know, there was a certain section of society that felt a bit convinced by what they were saying. Even they feel alienated now, and they are realizing that the problems afflicting the country and even affecting them on individual levels, those problems are they go much deeper than just PTI or just one man sitting in Adiala jail. And so I think that there is going to be some desperation that we're going to be seeing from the Adiala jail man. And so there are talks going on of, you know, an anti-government protest drive after Eid. Let's see where that takes them, because currently I think that Pakistan is faced with such a serious security threat that, you know, there is no time, there is no room left for petty politics. The PTI, despite having been invited, did not even engage in the national security moot which took place in parliamentary committee last week. And their, you know, stumbling block was that, oh, if you let our PTI founder come out of an Adiala jail for one particular session in the parliament, only then we are going to participate. These are all excuses. Because I remember that when he was the prime minister, I'm speaking of PTI founder, not once did he attend any national security parliamentary committee session at all. And now all of a sudden, when he's not even a National Assembly member, he wants to be there. So I think that these are tactics that they are resorting to in order to avoid facing the real problems afflicting our country. And yes, as one of my co-panelists just mentioned, it's no secret that PTI does have a soft corner for, You could call it TTP or Fitna al-Kharij, or by whatever nomenclature you want to refer to it. But their administration in their more than a decade-long governance of KP has only seen lives being devastated. I've heard people living in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa just telling me how their standards of living have deteriorated day after day and year after year. And I think that a huge chunk of the responsibility needs to be borne by PTI, which they refuse to do so.
Muneeb, I think it's early days yet, and I'm going to include Safi in this conversation later on. But you know, in terms of for all political parties, it's about the vote bank, right? For all our criticism of KP, do you think that the vote bank there, let's be candid, is willing and going to, you know, is willing to look at other party options? You think the other political parties have been able to make a dent there?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are grassroots movements in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, you know, which talk about peacefully raising issues that affect the communities living in that particular part of the country, their particular concerns, which perhaps we don't really get to know much about in the mainstream, and they are gaining traction among the, you know, electorate and voters and the populace living in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So I think that if ever, and that is, I mean, there are doubts about that as well, if ever there was any monopoly over political power within KP that PTI had for a few years, I think that it's withering away, it's slipping away from their hands, because this much has been made very clear by PTI itself, that, you know, the concerns of people and communities living within KP are not, forget at the forefront. They're not even amongst, you know, the main issues that PTI is interested in. And I mean, when they should have been present in KP, they should have been sorting things out there, what was happening, you know, in Chaman, for example, or Parachana. They were instead indulging in hooliganism on the streets of Islamabad, in red zone.
Let me include Safiullah in this also. Safiullah, which party then? You think that, you know, if we talk about major political parties making inroads in KP, which party then do you think is in a position? I mean, of course, one has to acknowledge it's early days yet, and of course, you know, it's just a year or so into this government. But continuing on this trend, do you think that there is a hope that there are other political parties who will be able to perhaps have a stake, a real stake in KP? How do you look at things in that way?
Such a deadly question, Mahrukh, honestly. So I think I might have told this to you in personal discussions, that I myself was one of the founding members of a local grassroots party that Muneeb was just referring to, that started in KPK. This was the Awami Workers Party. It was a left-wing party. We wanted to sort of, you know, try and do something. Nothing happened. We kept thinking that we would gain traction, but when it came to the time of elections, we would suddenly get a rude awakening, a shock, when people would just start voting for what they had already been voting for many years. And then, of course, there was the PTI phenomenon that took place. Now, when you ask me which party, it's actually a very serious and a very interesting question. And the problem here is that there is no longer a level playing field for political parties in KPK. The level playing field does not exist for these parties because of TTP attacks. TTP has killed a record number of people from People's Party. They have killed a record number of people from ANP. And I think any other political party that tries to get up, TTP will start targeting them. And why is that? Because TTP has very clearly stated in no unminced words that its members and its supporters need to vote for PTI. They have consistently shown support for PTI. Whether PTI has a soft corner for them or not is a different question. But they definitely have aligned themselves 100% with PTI. And because of the immense terrorism threat, the ordinary grassroots workers of political parties cannot go out because they get targeted. And when they get targeted, they cannot campaign. So it's a sort of like a chicken and egg situation where they are unable to campaign because of this terrorism. And PTI, whilst it's in the government, continues to support this terrorism. It has become, I mean, I'm not going to say that they are directly connected, but indirectly PTI is benefiting from this militancy, because this militancy ensures that no other people can raise their voice. And PTI is the only political party that continues to basically support this militancy by consistently saying things like, oh, violence is not the option, we will not support a violent operation. And what they do is they essentially cut off the only kinetic operations that you can take against them to try and stop them. So they keep saying things like, give us money. Now, PTI has also been given a record amount of money to counter terrorism. The KPK government has been given the highest amount of money by the government of Pakistan to counter terrorism. There is no accountability for that. We have no idea where it went. For all intents and purposes, from our knowledge, all we know is that that money went into mobilizing PTI workers to attack D-Chok. That was meant to be used against the Fitnat al-Kharij or TTP, whatever you want to call it. So that's what the issue is. The issue is that we are stuck in a rut where we cannot get out. If the military tries to intervene to try and capture these terrorists, it becomes once again a national issue of military interfering. If the police does it, Pakistan becomes a police state. So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just live with terrorism? My humble opinion is that we have crossed the bridge of trying to negotiate with these terrorists. We need to go in and we need to have the strongest possible military action against them. That's it. There's nothing else that needs to be done, at least for now. A long-term solution is re-education, reintegration, reforms.
Going back to the relevance of a political party and what it means overall as far as this strategy is concerned, I'll come back to you. Let me include Aniq Zafar. Aniq Zafar, do you agree with what Muneeb is saying, and of course Safiullah also? Overall, in terms of the situation within KP, then mobilizing, which is what we're talking about as far as PTI is concerned. How is it going to, do you think it's going to be a saving grace? How, is it going to be beneficial for the party when, you talk about 3 days protest outside Adiala? What kind of support are they going to be? What kind of people are they going to be able to bring out? And to what end? Are they also again going to, exhaust those people that actually do even support them till now?
Well, I'll start with your last part of your question. To what end? Basically, that is what is missing from the whole strategy of PTI. That they have not really deliberated on the whole plan and its outcome. They think about a tactic and they wish that it somehow should bring them to their objective. They do not define their objective initially.
Is the objective bringing out,
I mean, if that is the objective, what does it gain? Because right now, again, what they have to understand is that right now they may not agree with it, they may have objections on it. There are working governments, there is a parliament, there is judiciary. So when the country is not in election season, everything happens in the parliament, in the courts, or within on a dialogue in a dialogue between government and opposition. Government and opposition dialogue usually happens in the corridors and committee rooms of the parliament, right? So this is how it plays out. If you try to bring it out to the street, it may keep you hopeful, it may keep you alive, but it is not going to give you any results. That is what we have seen in the last 1 year, and we may see it for another 6 months, but I totally think that PTI is fast losing its relevance.
But do you think that also
in the national matters, they are sitting out in the National Security Committee, they are not participating. So what is their role now? If the problem is that their social media sportways, in every program I pointed out that when the party leadership and even the imprisoned party leadership, including the chairman of the former chairman of the party and former prime minister, they all react to social media. They do not react to political realities. That when people like us ask them to react to political realities instead of social media ruckus, they say that you are compromised, you are beholden to establishment. No, that is not what we are saying. What we are saying is that there are political realities. You have to negotiate within those you have to negotiate your space within those political realities. You cannot distance yourself from the political realities and then think that you will achieve your objectives.
Daniyal, do you think it's possible, of course the social media aspect that Aniq Sahab is talking about is certainly there, but do you think it's also possible that, when we look at the overall seats right now, if we look at the picture overall, I keep saying this because, I think that you will agree with me in terms of relevance. If we look at the numbers, they are in opposition, they are in KP. Do you think that their voter is, choosing to lie low and remain their voter, and they will again, if we look at an election, or, as I said, it's early days, but do you think that, that support, is it eroding or not? That is my question.
Honestly speaking, I don't think that their sport base or the other opposition in Pakhtunkhwa has been able to put a dent on their vote bank. And the reason, one of the reasons that Safi just mentioned, I totally disagree with, which was that whosoever will gain some political power in KPK, the party will be targeted by TTPC. If a political party or a politician is scared of anything for that, because politics is not something you have to do. It's volunteer work, and it's a job of sacrifice. And people like even the top leadership like Benazir Bhutto, she had to give the ultimate sacrifice. Bhutto had to give. Every big politician, they have to be prepared for this. Now, the reason why the opposition in Pakhtunkhwa has not been able to I'll call the agenda of PTI a propaganda. But to expose that propaganda, the other political leaders have to first of all, they have to give a vision, and that vision has to be proactive. Now, I'll give you an example. A person who had the potential to do active politics in Pakhtunkhwa was Maulana Fazlur Rahman against them. Now look at, although I have a lot of respect for him, he's a senior politician, a big Maulana, but he's not proactive. He waited for his own house, Jamia Haqqaniya, to be attacked, his own school of thought, the Deoband school of thought, to be attacked by these banned outfits or whoever the terrorists were, to call for a national conference, to call for national unity against terrorism. Whereas the issue was, if a politician's mentality is, as long as I am not affected or my followers are not affected, my disciples are not affected, I don't care. So this sort of politics will not, you won't be able to gather people with you. Secondly, like I said earlier about being proactive, like I'll give you an example. In Pakhtunkhwa, one of the founding fathers of ANP, Wali Khan, he gave a speech in the National Assembly back in the 70s, and when we were about to, although I agree with him or not, but look at his vision, that when we were supporting the Afghan Taliban against the Soviets, in his speech he said that today you're training guerrillas to go fight in Afghanistan. Tomorrow these trained guerrillas will come and disturb the peace in your country. So this is called vision, this is called being proactive. Whereas right now, all of them, they wait for PTI to give a statement, or they wait for them to come and, like, even the ministers at the federal level.
Reputation is not, I mean, they have to
this
be
is not
proactive.
enough. If you have to go, like I was saying about this local government issue, there are a million other issues, but all the other parties, they're not even interested in countering them on those issues. They're just waiting for them to come up with a new plan. And when they do, like even our ministers at the federal level, you will not see them actively talking against PTI until they will come and assemble in Chowk.
Let me go to Muneeb with this. Muneeb, it's interesting what Daniyal is saying. He's saying that perhaps a more proactive approach rather than a reactive approach is needed with regard to political leaders. But when we talk to the political parties, when we talk to their reps, they're saying that we are too busy, as far as the business of governance is concerned. And why should we be engaging in active, proactive approach with regard to the opposition? Let the opposition do its job, and let us do our job of governance. Let them criticize. Why should we make them more relevant? Why should we, become more active and like I said, they will become more relevant if the government chooses to do so. How do you look at it?
I mean, in all fairness, the ruling parties, the ruling coalition, they have extended the olive branch to PTI and the opposition from time to time. I mean, hadn't a committee been formed just a couple of months and weeks ago when they were negotiating whether the Judicial Commission should sit and deliberate upon what really happened and took place on 9th May 2023 or 26th November 2024? But who broke it off? Who called it off? It was the PTI which called it off. Similarly, as far as any national security related talks are concerned, again, the PTI is not cooperating because what they are.
Muneeb, I'm going to interject. What he's talking about is, he's saying that, they should be more proactive in criticizing PTI, in, pointing out, their flaws, in pointing out their degeneration, in pointing out, their what they say versus what they do, all of those things. So do you think that that proactive approach is necessary at this time, when things seem to be quite normal, things seem to be quite stable, other than, of course, we are looking at the terrorism issue and the government tackling those real issues at this time? Do you think that the government should engage in that, which is what Daniyal is saying?
Yeah, so what the government should really engage in is the security threat, because, just in my previous response, I had mentioned that PTI and all that topic, petty politics, that has faded into irrelevance. And it's a luxury to be actually indulging in it. And we cannot afford that luxury at this moment when, more than dozens of people have lost their lives in Balochistan. We cannot have tensions on ethnic grounds, sectarian violence, or on religious grounds. What we need is national cohesion. And PTI and PTI related politics, it's distraction. It's basically a political party which is saying just us, just us, just us. But luckily the focus has shifted away from them, but unluckily for all the wrong reasons. So all the wrong reasons, when I say that, what I mean to say is that we are faced with such a big existential crisis in the form of security threat, which is not only, affecting our security forces and their safety and their lives, but also civilian lives. And so what is really needed is that we need to be able to distinguish between a legitimate human rights movements and legitimate political movements, legitimate peaceful protests, versus those people who take the law into their own hands and they believe that by using violence, they are going to hold the whole of the country hostage to their whims. And that is really, really dangerous. And that, although is rearing its ugly head in KP and Balochistan particularly, but it's not like, the part of Pakistan where I'm sitting right now, Punjab, that is also immune from this sort of taking the law in their own hands. So when non-state actors start feeling that for whatever grounds and under whatever pretext, be that ethnic or religious pretext, they can never, ever, ever usurp the state's role. And as is said under the social contract theory, only state has the right to violence. Why? Because they have a social contract with us. They use that violence. The state uses that violence for the benefit of people at large and to protect us from exactly these kinds of non-state actors that I'm talking about. So, it's good, hard state. There needs to be a hardline approach towards those who do not respect the constitutional and legal framework of the country, who only understand the language of violence, and they are using that violence and the violent tactics against our security forces and also against innocent civilians. They need to be taken, in the hardest of manners possible, because we need a country, we need a society, we need a nation which is sustainable.
Right, fair enough. Of course.
Can I add something?
Ji.
I don't agree with what Muneeb Sahib is saying, because see, if you look at the time of Pervez Musharraf, there was a very hardline approach against terrorism and against these fundamentalists. But there wasn't that kind of progress which we saw when democracy was restored and when the SWAT agreement was made with the Taliban. That was the turning point in which, although it was the brainchild of Asif Zardari and ANP to expose these people, for a moment everyone thought, why are they dealing with them? Why are they giving them what they were asking for? But what happened was 6 months later, when they over and time and again they violated those written agreement, everyone saw the true face of Tehreek-e-Taliban Swat.
The strategy, as far as on terrorism is concerned, certainly,
it's impossible to defeat terrorism without changing the mindset.
Of
and
course.
It's impossible to change the mindset without bringing the masses and especially without the political parties giving it ownership. This is a bigger issue. You cannot just by using force against it.
But I think, and Muneeb can correct us, but I don't think Muneeb is saying that, the two are mutually exclusive of one another.
Exactly.
Just using force is not going to help us.
I want to comment briefly, and my brief comment is that I've just said at the outset that there needs to be distinction between legitimate political dissent, which is peaceful, which does not believe itself to be above the state, which does not use violence against civilians, versus those movements, those non-state actors who usurp the state's role. And that distinction is extremely important to maintain, and a hardline approach is necessary. Why Mr. Musharraf had failed back in the day? Well, there were so many factors that would be opening a whole new Pandora box in a very limited time right now. All I can say is that you cannot have a system where you are tolerating the intolerant.
But Safiullah, if you've heard the discussion, overall between Daniyal and Muneeb, do you think that this ploy to remain relevant as far as the PTI is concerned, what else are they to do, in your opinion? Participate in the Security Council meeting, become more relevant in the assembly? They traditionally, of course, and we've spoken about this from time to time, benefit from being, the outcasts, so to speak, and, by trying to distinguish themselves from the other political parties. And this is the only way they feel they can do this. But what will happen if they come, of course, they know that this will hardly, come to anything. It doesn't look like it will come to anything as far as this protest is concerned. The government will of course say that, these are the numbers and these are the people who were there. They will expose them. Then what happens?
Okay, so Mahrukh, my honest opinion on the matter. Firstly, I really enjoyed hearing both of my friends, Muneeb and Daniyal, have this really lively discussion. I was very lucky to be listening to the both of them and really enjoyed myself there. But as far as the question here is concerned, it's I think it's we have this. I'm just going to give my opinion on what the matter is, and then we'll move on to the larger context. So, in my opinion, PTI is nothing more than a cult. I honestly think I've said it many times on your show. I've gotten flack from it from PTI leaders as well publicly. One of them actually went on Twitter and started berating me, which sort of became viral. So I've been through that, but I'll say it again. Because they have it's just one objective, right? Get our leader out of jail, make him the king of Pakistan, give him sweeping powers. Everybody else is wrong. Judiciary is wrong. All other political parties are wrong. Only our Messiah is right. So if that's the mindset that we're dealing with, I don't see them any different from some sort of a cult that comes in and wants to install their leader. That's a very different approach. And luckily, that approach is now getting exposed. It's now fading into irrelevance. It had its Mayday heyday, was very popular. Everybody benefited a lot from it, even with the government. But for once, I am now beginning to feel like many people who supported PTI once are beginning to see the truth and now turning back on them. Now, the greater issue is the issue of intolerance, of terrorism that has been pervasive and that has been there since maybe the creation of Pakistan, maybe goes before that. This is for two reasons, in my opinion. Firstly, because of certain intolerant behaviors in our culture that needs to be reformed, that needs to be done through education, that needs to be done through consensus. I am not at all, once again, going to ever deny that there isn't a need for basic grassroots reform. But we have been saying that since the creation of Pakistan, and that has not happened. In fact, terrorism is doubling almost every year. There have been instant times and periods when we have managed to curtail terrorism, but terrorism keeps rearing its ugly head, keeps coming back in one form or another. One Jamaat, Lashkar-e-Taiba, then becomes Jamaat al-Dawa, then becomes Hizb ut-Tahrir. They just keep sort of changing and changing. You stop one, another one comes up. This is not working. So, in my opinion, the only way to truly get rid of this is to have a short-term solution and a long-term solution. A short-term solution is a kinetic operation, go and kill them. It's very simple. We have a very powerful military, and the short-term solution has been working everywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world there has been instances of terrorism, kinetic operations have worked. This we have seen in the case of Turkey. We have seen that the Tamil Tigers were doing this in India. In Sri Lanka, the Sri Lankan government did it and managed to curtail them. We have seen that in Turkey, where not right now what's happening in Turkey, but previously when there was an Islamic terrorist groups that were popping up, Turkey conducted military operations and ended them. So just about everywhere in the world where violent extremism has taken place, where people have tried to use violence, as Muneeb said, the state is the only authority that should have the monopoly of over violence, and it needs to display that so that people understand who has the monopoly. If you continue to behave in a manner that, we have to enter into consensus, we have to bring all parties together, but the other party is consistently using violence, then the state is no longer the one which holds a monopoly over violence. That is when the state starts to lose its legitimacy. In order to keep its sovereignty and in order to keep its legitimacy, we must conduct, even if it's for show, we must conduct kinetic operations that show that it is only the state that is allowed to have the guns within the country. Unfortunately, that is what the state has not done, and the reason why the state does not do it is because of this constant chatter in the background that, oh, let's have an all parties conference, let's get everybody on board, let's have an ulama conference, let's have this first, let's have that first. Well, we've had all of those.
I think we've deviated from the topic entirely, but Daniyal.
See, now what Safi was saying, see the purpose for an all parties conference more than a national, see now what these band outfits do. For example, in Balochistan, now what BLA basically, the propaganda that they are sailing on is that we are protecting Baloch nationalism. Similarly, a lot of Taliban in Pakhtunkhwa, they take refuge behind the Pakhtun code of conduct, which is the Pakhtun Wali. Now, unless and until you differentiate between their agenda and culture, you will not be able to achieve the results just by using force. This is
but I think that's what I think Aniq Sahab can also, I feel that overall, of course, but it's not really just about force against the alternative. It's about using whatever alternatives are open.
One example I want to give you, in Afghanistan, often when Mullah Omar was confronted, a few times even from Pakistan delegations were sent, whenever an issue, if you go back in history on the culture, the Pakhtun culture would come, he would take a stand. For instance, giving his gas, a lot of things. But even
as I
if
said,
they would take precedent over Islam,
one is not mutually exclusive of the other. And of course, we've seen the state perform kinetic operations where they've been needed.
Kinetic operations are important, and at the same level, non-kinetic engagement, that which is Daniyal,
which is of course has been part of the National Action Plan.
That is part of the National Action Plan, and obviously right now we are also trying to build a consensus. But I think what Safiullah is referring to is that even if there is not that kind of consensus as PTI may not be part of it, or some Baloch parties, some-nationalist parties may not become part of it. But kinetic operations cannot be put on a hold just because there is no political consensus. Kinetic operations have to go on, because if you do not do that, then common people's trust on the ability of the state to protect their life, their property, their businesses erodes, and that is very dangerous for the existence of any nation state.
And of course, no state
has to give its guarantee to larger part of its society and nation that it can protect them.
Of course, and
only then a political process can take hold. If there is no security, stability, then there is less chance of political process taking hold in any given community or society or state.
Right, fair enough. And in any case, Aniq Sahab, whether one political party, because like you said, and we know that PTI chose not to be a part of this security meeting that was held recently. If they choose, any political party chooses to sit out of such an important issue, that's
their loss.
That's their loss, and that cannot impact.
And I don't think that any action which the state may have planned or may have been planning
is going to be impacted by that,
because state has to sort of go on and fight
exactly.
its good
And
fight.
also it goes back to that argument, I think unfortunately I have very little time, but it goes back to that whole argument about how the PTI at one time thought that it was good and effective strategy to sit out of the political process.
Yeah.
You know, by resigning in Punjab, we saw that. And that
Resigning
seems to
from the
have
National Assembly and resigning from Punjab.
and that seemed to have
dissolving.
backfired. And you know, later on it was also acknowledged by many of the PTI leaders that perhaps that was not an effective strategy at the time. So, you know, of course, we've seen that those blunders have been made from time to time as far as the opposition is concerned. Unfortunately, that's all the time that I have. Thank you so much for being with us today. Aniq Zafar Saab, Daniyal Sheikh, thank you for joining us today. Muneeb Qadir, thank you for being with us. Safi, Ghauri, thank you for joining us today. Overall, of course, as far as PTI as a political party is concerned, their relevance is concerned, whether any kind of protest at this time is going to be able to manifest into a relevant, you know, a relevant political party, increase their relevance, you know, make them perhaps more important and more noticeable on the national scene remains to be seen. As far as the government is concerned, they say that they've done the IMF deal, they are on their way to restoring other things as far as economy is concerned. They are moving ahead with regard to that. They're moving ahead with regard to the political process as a whole, and little or no importance is largely being given to these kind of protests that are being talked about at this time. Of course, how relevant they are and what really happens, we'll know you know, post-Eid. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.